Once upon a time, in a small village on the edge of a dark forest, there was a little girl named Little Red Riding Hood. She always wore a red cloak that her grandmother had made for her, and the villagers whispered that the cloak was enchanted. The villagers often spoke of the forest with caution. "Stay on the path," they warned, "for the forest is full of strange creatures and shadows that linger." One evening, as the sun began to set, Little Red Riding Hood's mother called to her. "Your grandmother is not feeling well. Take this basket to her, but remember, stay on the path, and beware of the things that roam the woods after dark." Little Red Riding Hood replied, "Don't worry, mother, I'll be careful." But the shadows in the forest seemed to grow darker as Little Red Riding Hood stepped into the woods, a strange sense of unease creeping up her spine. The deeper she walked, the quieter the forest became. The trees stretched tall and thin, their branches twisting into shapes that looked almost human. The forest seemed alive, watching, waiting. As Little Red Riding Hood continued, she heard the rustle of leaves behind her, and the distant hoot of an owl. But there was something else, something not quite right. Suddenly, a wolf appeared from the shadows. His eyes glowed like embers in the fading light. He stepped toward her slowly, his movements smooth and deliberate. "Good evening, Little Red Riding Hood. What brings you so deep into the forest, all alone?" the wolf asked. "I'm going to my grandmother's house. She's ill, and I'm bringing her food," Little Red Riding Hood replied. "And what kind of food do you bring her, little girl?" "Perhaps I could help you find the quickest path," said the wolf. Little Red Riding Hood remembered her mother's words and felt a shiver run down her spine. She knew she mustn't trust the wolf, but something in his eyes made her hesitate. "Thank you, but I must keep going. Goodbye, Mr. Wolf," she said. "Goodbye, Little Red Riding Hood. Be careful in the dark woods. Things aren't always what they seem," the wolf said with a grin as he disappeared into the shadows. Finally, Little Red Riding Hood arrived at her grandmother's house, a small cottage hidden deep in the forest. The house seemed quiet, too quiet, and the wind whispered through the trees as she knocked on the door. "Grandmother, it's me, Little Red Riding Hood," she called. "Come in, dear, I've been waiting for you," came the muffled voice from inside. When Little Red Riding Hood entered the house, she felt a chill in the air. The room was dimly lit, and her grandmother's voice sounded strange, hollow. "Grandmother, your voice sounds different," Little Red Riding Hood said, her voice trembling. "I'm just tired, dear. Come closer, my sweet," said the voice from the bed. Little Red Riding Hood stepped closer, but something was off. Her grandmother's eyes glinted in a way that wasn't quite right. The room felt colder, the shadows creeping ever closer. Before Little Red Riding Hood could react, the wolf leaped from behind the curtains, his teeth glinting in the dim light. He had tricked her. "Did you think I wouldn't find you, little girl? You should have stayed on the path. Now you've wandered too far," the wolf said with a menacing growl. But Little Red Riding Hood, with her quick wits, grabbed the basket and threw the contents, bread and cakes, at the wolf. In the confusion, the wolf stumbled, and Little Red Riding Hood ran toward the door. With all her might, Little Red Riding Hood ran back through the dark forest, the wolf's growls echoing behind her. But she remembered her mother's words, and she stayed on the path, following it all the way back to the village. When she finally reached home, her mother embraced her tightly, relieved to see her safe. The forest would always be there, with its secrets and shadows, but Little Red Riding Hood knew now that some paths were better left untrodden. And so, Little Red Riding Hood learned that the forest, like life, was full of dangers and mysteries. She would always be cautious and never forget the lessons of the dark woods. And from that day on, she stayed on the path, never venturing into the shadows again. The end.